Hello and welcome to another instalment of Talking Wizards. I am delighted to welcome Professor McGonagall to the studio. It is an opportunity for me to speak to a legendary teacher and scholar, so I will be asking questions that I've always wanted to ask a Hogwarts teacher in an informal setting. I really hope you enjoy the conversation. Professor, welcome to Talking Wizards.
I hope it goes well. I've never done something like this before, by the way, so be nice.
I am so glad that you are here. You can be certain I will try to make sure you leave happy. Don't worry.
I don't doubt you will. I have heard you're lovely from Ginny, so I have no reason to actually be afraid.
Thank you, Ginny. She's incredible. I'm not very good with praise, by the way. Shall we get started instead of me acting all funny because someone said something nice?
I've been intrigued by this whole process, so indeed, let's proceed. You can ask me anything you want, but bear in mind that I may not answer every question.
I have a feeling, Professor McGonagall, that you will be in your comfort zone because I am going to treat you like a teacher and ask you questions that are scholarly in nature. But before I get to those questions, did you manage to listen to the conversation I had with Lucius Malfoy?
I didn't, and I must confess I don't know how to, but I did hear about some of the things he said. The owls have been busier than they usually are at this time of year.
He didn't hold back, I can tell you that. We broadcast on WWN talk shows, by the way, at 7 in the evening every Friday. In case you are taking a break from your duties as headmistress, you can listen in.
I will be sure to tune in when the opportunity lends itself.
Excellent. Anyway, I was going to ask you about what you thought about Mr. Malfoy's interview, but I think I literally just changed my mind. I am sure everyone listening will know your stance on pure blood supremacy. Instead, I want to begin by asking, what do the teachers do during the holidays, Professor McGonagall?
Oh, that's a nice, easy one to begin with. Far easier to navigate than the question you had in mind anyway. Well, the holidays at Hogwarts are a mix of rest and responsibility. While some professors do take time to visit family or enjoy a break, there's always work to be done. We oversee the students who remain at Hogwarts, catch up on grading, and sometimes even use the quieter periods to refine some of our skills.
As in, do you practice spells?
Oh yes, of course, and not just spells, everything. Potion making too. I like to allocate some time to refine my transfiguration, a bit of herbology when I have the chance.
You see, we tend to forget that professors too need to stay on top of things, because growing up, we saw them as the ones who just know everything.
Where did you study, Miss Sterling, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, I was at Beauxbatons.
Oh, wonderful institution. Plenty of professors to look up to over there.
Yes, and it does make us forget that magical skills do need constant practice, for everyone.
Absolutely. Magical skills, much like any other abilities, require regular practice to remain sharp and effective. Even as experienced witches and wizards, we must continuously hone our craft to maintain proficiency. I'm sure you know, transfiguration involves intricate wand movements and complex incantations that must be executed with exactness. If one were to neglect practice, even the most skilled practitioner could find their spells becoming less reliable or accurate over time. I should also add, apologies for the interruption, the magical world is always evolving. New spells and techniques emerge, and understanding them requires staying current with ongoing magical research. Practicing not only helps in maintaining our current skills, but also in adapting to new developments in the field.
So, when you are not becoming even better at your job, do you ever just switch off and take a break from Hogwarts altogether?
Oh, of course. Even with the demands of my position, it's important to take time to step away and recharge. I often retreat to my personal quarters or visit the countryside. A change of scenery and some time in a quieter environment is always refreshing.
It is the summer holidays as we speak. Are you planning on going on one of those retreats this year?
I am on my way to one of them now, actually, which is why I was able to join you today. If it was any other time of year, I would have had no other option but to politely decline your invitation.
And we are grateful that you took some time out of your holiday to do this, Professor. Will you be visiting anyone?
I do enjoy the solitude of the countryside and the opportunity to be alone with my thoughts. There's a certain peace in being by oneself, where I can fully unwind, reflect and indulge in personal interests like reading or knitting without distraction.
This is really fascinating. I've read a lot about you, Professor McGonagall, and have heard about your exploits from Ginny and others I've met since I've been here. But it seems like the last couple of minutes have changed my perception of you completely.
I hope they were saying horrible things about me in those books, and now your perception is that I am not so bad.
No, I mean, I know you are joking, but for the record, they say amazing things about you in the books, and now you seem even more amazing.
Well, we are people too, you know, us professors.
All right, since I have a professor in front of me, I would like to delve into some magical history if you don't mind.
Oh, magical history. I hope Professor Binns doesn't listen to this, but I will enlighten you the best I can. Go ahead.
Brilliant. I will begin my historical inquiries by asking about Merlin. I spend a lot of time with Muggles. My father has no magical ancestry, and I have always been intrigued by the fact that he is a wizard that exists in Muggle folklore and in the wizarding world. The Order of Merlin is awarded in his honour too. By the way, in case you're thinking that I should know this, I didn't really get to delve too much into his story because history of magic at Beauxbatons was more focused on European witches and wizards. How much of what we know about him is history, and how much is legend?
Well, Merlin was a fascinating figure who straddles the line between history and legend. To address your question, Merlin was indeed a real and highly influential wizard. He lived during the medieval period and played a significant role in shaping the magical and political landscape of his time. He is often remembered for his wisdom, as well as his role as an advisor to King Arthur, which is where much of the Muggle folklore originates. However, as with many historical figures, the tales surrounding Merlin have almost certainly been embellished over time. While he was a prominent and respected wizard, some of the more fantastical elements of his story, such as his immortality, have been exaggerated in Muggle stories.
Do you know that in Muggle history, even the existence of King Arthur is a matter of dispute?
I am, and I find that quite intriguing. In the magical world, King Arthur's existence is not in question. He is regarded as a historical figure, and his connection to Merlin is well documented in our history. However, it's understandable that Muggles might dispute his existence, given their lack of access to certain records and knowledge that we have in the magical community.
Anyway, back to Merlin. We hear claims that he was the most powerful wizard of all time. Is there any basis for such claims?
Let me think about how to answer this without causing a stir. I'd say Merlin is certainly one of the most renowned and influential wizards in history, but the claim that he was the most powerful of all time is a bit more complex. It's important to understand that magical power can be measured in many ways, through raw magical ability, knowledge, influence, or the legacy one leaves behind. Magical power has manifested in different ways through different wizards. For example, Albus Dumbledore, who lived centuries after Merlin, was also considered extraordinarily powerful and made significant contributions to the magical world in his own right. Then there are dark wizards like Gellert Grindelwald and Tom Riddle, who, while powerful, used their abilities for far more nefarious purposes. So, while Merlin was undoubtedly one of the greatest wizards of all time, whether he was the most powerful is a matter of interpretation. His legacy, however, is indisputable, and that's perhaps why his name endures so strongly in both wizarding and Muggle worlds.
That, Professor McGonagall, is an academic's answer if I have ever heard one. We are far less mature around here. Let me try this. In your opinion, would Merlin have won a duel against, say, Dumbledore?
Ah, the age-old question of hypothetical duels between great wizards. It's a bit like comparing apples and broomsticks, if you'll forgive the expression. That aside, Dumbledore and Merlin were both extraordinarily powerful, but they lived in very different times, facing different challenges. Merlin's era was one of early magical discovery and the formation of many of the traditions and spells that we still use today. His contributions laid the groundwork for much of what followed, and he was a wizard of immense power and wisdom. On the other hand, Albus Dumbledore was not only an exceptionally skilled wizard and a brilliant strategist and thinker, he also benefited from centuries of development in our understanding of magic. If you were to compel me, and I were to set my scholarly caution aside, I would say Dumbledore would win simply due to the period he lived in.
Well, I think I have a follow-up question to that.
Before you proceed, I must add that of course they would never have duelled because they would have been on the same side if they were contemporaries. They were both noble human beings, which is a far more significant aspect of who they were than their magical prowess.
What if they were contemporaries who benefited from the magical knowledge of the same period in history? Who would come out on top?
Oh, Miss Sterling, that is as far as I will go on this topic. I thought you were going to treat me like a professor. These are questions one hears when the whiff of butterbeer is in the air at an inn somewhere.
That is exactly why I'm asking, Professor. These topics are always discussed among the general community, and we never get to ask an actual professor who knows their history, outside of a school setting where the answers are always two-sided. I would, and I'm sure the listeners would too, love to know what your personal opinion is.
Believe me, there are people listening who have other candidates, and if this reaches people from other parts of the world, many will be laughing that we have not considered the likes of Matopiwazi, a legendary African wizard, Xingzhe from China, Apuch, a great Mayan wizard, and there are plenty more. And some would even say Morgana, who was a contemporary of Merlin, deserves to be in the conversation. It truly is futile.
So, you're not going to tell us?
It's not that I don't want to, Miss Sterling. I genuinely don't know how to give you a definitive answer, and that won't change, believe me, in the moments I spend in this studio.
Oh, you know this is called a studio.
Well, yes.
Lucius Malfoy didn't. Well, I tried. At least I got you to say Dumbledore would win against Merlin.
Considering that he benefited from centuries of development, it says nothing about their innate abilities or potentials.
Noted. Let's move on then. What can you tell us about the origins of the Order of Merlin?
The origins of the Order of Merlin. It is important to know that the award was formalized long after Merlin's time, during the late Middle Ages. It was established by the Wizengamot, our High Court, as a way to honor individuals who exemplify the values Merlin championed. We've already spoken about how formidable he was as a wizard, but that was not the primary reason behind the award being named after him. It was because of his efforts to promote the responsible use of magic and to foster positive attitudes towards Muggles.
And there are different levels for different levels of bravery, aren't there?
Yes, there are. There is the Order of Merlin, First Class, awarded for outstanding bravery. It is awarded to witches and wizards who show bravery in the face of extreme danger to their lives and have a lasting impact. Then there is Second Class, which is awarded to those who show bravery in the face of extreme danger to their lives too. And finally, Third Class, which is awarded to those whose bravery makes a significant contribution to the magical world, though not necessarily while facing a threat to their lives.
What exactly is the difference between first and second?
The difference is the lasting impact part. It is a slight grey area, if you ask me. That aside, all three classes are held in very high esteem in the wizarding world.
You received an Order of Merlin First Class for your bravery during the Second Wizarding War, the first person I have ever spoken to who has any version of the award, by the way. I'm surprised Harry and Ginny Potter haven't received one yet, in all honesty. Where does it rank on your list of accolades?
It is just there, Miss Sterling. It is wonderful to be recognised, but the true accomplishments, in my mind, are the lives we saved and the students we helped shape into capable, kind and courageous witches and wizards. It is an answer one could forget very quickly, but it is the real truth.
I wish I could say I understand, but I'm 27. I was probably 1 or something at the time of the Second Wizarding War. And I wasn't even in this country. I just can't relate to you saying that your true accomplishments are the lives you saved. That world seems so distant to me.
I am very happy, Lily, that you can't relate to that. And I hope that you are never able to relate to it, thanks to many who sacrificed everything.
Based on what I have read and learned about, we are living at a time of relative peace in the wizarding community here. Do you think there is a likelihood that another dark wizard or witch will appear any time soon to disturb that peace?
History has shown us that dark wizards and witches often rise during times of unrest or significant change. I am of the opinion that the conditions are not conducive at this current moment for a dark wizard or a witch to gain any significant power. Furthermore, we've learned many lessons from past conflicts, and our institutions, such as the Ministry of Magic, are well prepared to address and counteract potential threats. Having said that, there is no room for complacency when it comes to such serious matters. The magical community and its leaders must always remain vigilant.
This is all so interesting. I got sidetracked. I think I could interview you for days, Professor McGonagall.
Oh, no, you couldn't, Miss Sterling. I wouldn't allow you to.
Okay, back to the topic. Do you think the world is a better place because of the kinds of reforms Merlin stood for?
Oh, no doubt. Taking a more cooperative approach has made the wizarding world and the Muggle world a much safer place. For example, one of the outcomes of this long-standing philosophy is the protocol of informing the Muggle Prime Minister about the existence of the wizarding world. This practice is a direct result of the principles Merlin championed. By maintaining a level of transparency and fostering communication between our world and the Muggle government, we build mutual respect and understanding. The decision to keep the Muggle Prime Minister informed helps to ensure that our two worlds can coexist more harmoniously, with a framework that allows for cooperation and addresses potential issues before they escalate. It reflects Merlin's belief in the value of responsible magic and respectful interaction with non-magical people. So yes, the world is indeed a better place because of Merlin's contributions.
I always giggle inside when I imagine that moment the Muggle Prime Minister receives their visit.
So do I.
Has there ever been a case of a Muggle Prime Minister not adhering to secrecy protocols?
As far as the official records and my own knowledge extend, there have been no instances where the Muggle Prime Minister has exposed the wizarding world. However, that kind of information is usually with those working at the Ministry of Magic. There is some knowledge, Miss Sterling, that has never seen the halls of Hogwarts and Beauxbatons.
I'm not surprised. Before we move on to something else, one last question on Merlin. Merlin went to Hogwarts.
He did.
And he was sorted into Slytherin.
He was.
Fighting for a better understanding between both worlds isn't what we have come to associate with Slytherin in recent years.
And recent years is the key point here, Miss Sterling. Slytherin's reputation has been somewhat tarnished because of what happened over the last 100 or so years. We mustn't forget that magical history goes back centuries, and there have been countless wizards and witches who were more accepting of a peaceful relationship between Muggles and wizards despite being sorted into Slytherin, nor were they so insistent on maintaining blood purity. You must be aware of Severus Snape and Horace Slughorn and their heroics during the Second Wizarding War.
Oh, of course.
They reached conclusions that do not fit the stereotypes that have sadly become commonplace. Merlin's legacy, too, reminds us that the house has produced some of the most influential and wise wizards in history.
Is it a coincidence, though, that the most prominent dark wizards in history were from Slytherin?
I have to think like a professor, Miss Sterling. I can't help but consider that there were dark wizards from other houses too, and some from no house at all. Gellert Grindelwald learned his magic at Durmstrang, so he didn't even get the privilege of wearing the sorting hat at Hogwarts. Peter Pettigrew was a Gryffindor, let's not forget. All things considered, Miss Sterling, we don't have an exact understanding of why some witches and wizards choose the path of darkness. If it were as simple as they come from Slytherin House, as headmistress at Hogwarts, I'd wait for the sorting hat to decide which house all the first years belong to, and send all the Slytherins packing that very evening. Thankfully, I do not have to do that.
Well put, Professor. Now, from one historical figure to another, how much longer do you intend to teach at Hogwarts?
I am sure some can't wait to see the back of me, but teaching at Hogwarts has been the greatest privilege of my life. It's a role I hold in the highest regard, and it has been deeply fulfilling to contribute to the education and development of young witches and wizards. As for how much longer I intend to teach, well, that's not something I've set in stone. I believe in giving my best to my students for as long as I am able to do so effectively. My commitment is to provide them with the knowledge, skills and values they need to succeed in their magical education and in life beyond Hogwarts.
Are you aware of universities in the Muggle world?
Am I aware of universities? Are you aware that my father was a Muggle, Miss Sterling?
I am, actually, so I don't know why I asked you that question.
I have a good understanding of how Muggles operate in this world of ours, primarily because, as professors, we tend to follow trends and cultural developments in the Muggle community as research. However, having a Muggle father allowed me to stay somewhat in touch with what happens outside of the magical community from a personal perspective too.
The actual question I want to ask you is this. In the Muggle world, it is normal for professors to move around, to go and take positions at different universities, sometimes to different parts of the world. I always found it odd that professors in the magical world tend not to travel a lot. Did you ever consider teaching at, say, Ilvermorny or Beauxbatons?
That's an interesting observation. There's the matter of the magical community being relatively small and tightly knit compared to the Muggle world, which might have something to do with it. There simply aren't as many schools for us to move around like in the Muggle world, which has thousands of educational institutions. We tend to stay where we're most needed too, where we can contribute the most, which often means remaining at the same school for many years. While I greatly respect institutions like Ilvermorny and Beauxbatons, I've never seriously considered leaving Hogwarts. The thought of uprooting myself from a place that holds so much history and personal significance just never seemed right. I've always believed that my place is here.
Professor McGonagall?
Sorry, Miss Sterling. I do need to add that there are witches and wizards who do travel to teach at different institutions. I was just confirming your observation that it isn't very common and explaining why so, and that I have never considered it myself.
I'm sure all of the students you have taught over the years are delighted that you chose to stay at Hogwarts. Professor McGonagall, it's been a pleasure. I wanted to ask you about the founding of Hogwarts. I had some questions about the Ministry of Magic too, but I know you have to go. Maybe you can join us again someday in the future.
If the time permits, I would love to come back. We need more sensible reporters in our community.
I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, I hope to have Ginny on in the future, when she's available. Hopefully, we will discuss journalism in the wizarding world.
You should invite Rita Skeeter too.
Maybe someday in the distant future. Professor, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Well, that is all we have time for. I hope all the listeners enjoyed learning about what Professor McGonagall does when she isn't doing her duties as headmistress. I also hope you can forgive me for my infatuation with Merlin. After all, it allowed Professor McGonagall to place him into a historical context for all of us. Remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment informing us about who you want to hear from in the future, and we will do our best to invite them on. Goodbye for now. We hope you tune in next time.